Hi everyone and welcome to Hit the Apex this week. It's Flyaway season once again with the Singapore Grand Prix coming up this weekend, and also we're going to be talking about Supercars too because it's our favourite time of year. Not only is it spring here in Australia, but it's the season of endurance as well. So Baden joining me, Jawad, as always. Plenty to talk about, starting with Singapore and Enduro season as well, which is always a bonus.
Yeah, it's probably crept up a bit. Both of us have had our own little getaways in recent weeks, and probably a bit of a lull until the last 48 hours, certainly on the Formula One front, but that's something we'll discuss later. But before that, yeah, we've got Singapore and Sandown, the start of the Enduro season.
Yeah, and starting off with Singapore, I guess Singapore in itself a bit of an endurance race, and time running out, you could say, on the title race too. 14 rounds in out of 21, and Lewis Hamilton came out of Monza with a mighty 30-point lead, and Sebastian Vettel's blunders again, and Ferrari's blunders in Italy. We talked about it at length, and I guess we're returning to the burial site, if you will, of Vettel's 2017 title aspirations, because turn one the crash that took out his teammate Kimi Raikkonen, one of the Red Bulls, I think Max Verstappen it was, not even 30 seconds into the race. How do they approach coming into this year and knowing that, the points lead is a lot more than it was last year, and there's a lot to win back this time?
Yeah, there's a bit of a different dynamic. You can say Ferrari certainly has a lot more momentum as far as its own competitiveness. It's just that Vettel's again been squandering that advantage, and Hamilton's got that breathing space to come in here. That theory that Mercedes will struggle, he's probably able to take a bit more of a back seat, and you never know if there's a repeat of 12 months ago, he'll be there in the wings to do it again. And I think for Ferrari, this really is the final stand. I can't see Hamilton getting another victory if it came to pass, and Vettel being able to turn it round. Hamilton's simply just been there every time, and this is one Ferrari just has to get right.
Well, on paper, it's a circuit that suits Ferrari and even Red Bull in that instance over Mercedes. So that's already a tick in the right box. And given that qualifying, I guess, determines how your race is going to pan out, given it's a street circuit. And also this year, they've actually narrowed some of the parts of the track by 2 meters as well, making it more difficult to overtake. I guess it's going to take for some kind of divine intervention or, the chaos that we saw last year at turn one to create a crazy result, or if you want to go back to 2008 and a bit of strategic masterclass, you could say, in inverted commas, by the Renault team. So yeah, on paper, it's definitely a circuit that Ferrari can excel at and dominate the weekend. But we said that at Monza too, and look what happened going into turn 4 there, and then Kimi Raikkonen ended up losing the race through no fault of his own either. So, and also this is one of Seb's strongest circuits as well. He's won 4 races here in his career, 3 back-to-back with Red Bull, and 2012 was that key race for me where it was Lewis Hamilton's titles hopes that went up in smoke at this race, and Sebastian Vettel came to win and dominated, and then that started his charge towards what was his 3rd title at the time. So,
And that is, on that note, a little bit ironic in the sense Vettel, yes, that catapulted him to his 3rd crown, but it also triggered Hamilton's move to Mercedes. That really sealed the deal after that disastrous season with reliability with McLaren, and things have played out since then where he's just taken it to another level. So it's just funny the way that these situations can work in different ways, short and long term.
yeah, Singapore's always been a key circuit like that, of course, and 2015 as well, Ferrari putting on the show there, and Sebastian winning there, and Hamilton's only had 3 wins here compared to Seb's 4. So, and Mercedes bit conservative this weekend tyre-wise. They're bringing more soft tyres than they are the hyper soft and the ultra soft or whatever. So again, perhaps they might use that as far as strategy is concerned, and that's probably the only way, if they don't qualify ahead of Ferrari, that they're going to try and beat the red cars.
Again, they can afford to really, that theory that they do struggle more with the tyres, that didn't seem to be the case certainly last time out at Monza, but in this instance, with the heat, which will still be a factor even under lights, you think that they're just going to be playing it a little bit more conservatively, and they'll be again doing enough to pounce the second that Ferrari shows any not mistakes per se, but just hesitation and making Ferrari go to the strategy board first, as was the case for Raikkonen at Monza, and they're the kind of 1%ers that seem to play it towards Mercedes' favour more often than not.
Yeah, they don't seem to dictate terms as much as Mercedes does. Mercedes are so used to winning that it's so natural that they can dictate the strategy and dictate what happens, whereas Ferrari, just as you say, a bit hesitant when it comes to these sort of things. Have they forgotten what it means like to dominate and to win like they used to in the early 2000s? So, if they can stand behind their strategic calls and be a bit more confident with them, I'm sure, they can actually start translating the pace that they have in that car to winning, and that's just goes back to what I said a few weeks ago about they've got the best car, but do they know how to win with the best car? So it's not just a given that they've got the best car that they're going to win every race. They've still got to nail all those other little things that it's just embarrassingly they're not doing at the moment.
It probably only accounts for about 10% when it comes down to strategy, but it's arguably its worth is about 90% in terms of that execution. You can be leading the pack on Saturday and up till lap 50 of 60 on Sunday, but at the end, if tyres go off a cliff or there's some pressure and Vettel's not able to handle it, it's all academic, and I guess you could make another case for needing a Ross Brawn type figure to pull off these master strokes and just see beyond that immediate moment where they might be feeling some earlier race pressure and they're just going to wait it out rather than pulling the trigger immediately.
Well, that's why Mercedes and the likes of James Vowles or whatever always seem to get it right, despite Austria where Lewis Hamilton pretty much berated them or whatever for not making the right call. 9 times out of 10, they're still perfect when it comes to strategy. And even if you want to argue that it's not been the best of late because Valtteri Bottas has been made the butler, as Maurizio Ravenni said in recent days, they still get it right. So that's what Ferrari and especially Jock Clear being the chief strategist or whatever needs to get right.
Yeah. What happened there? What happened? Remember that with Michael Schumacher? He wasn't afraid to put his man under the bus. So you can see he's an interesting character, Jock Clear, but he certainly deserves to be probably brought under the microscope if Ferrari's again out front and somehow they do hand it to Mercedes just when it's this clutch moment where there really is no coming back, I think, if Hamilton's again top step on Sunday. And
also given that the threat from Red Bull will be a lot more this weekend as well. We talked a lot about Daniel Ricciardo and how he's had a rotten run of luck, 4 retirements in the last 6 races. Singapore's a venue, much like Monaco, where Red Bull can easily find the ascendancy, but at this point I think Ferrari is just that little bit stronger. But we see Ricciardo with a bit of vengeance in his eyes strike back this weekend and even get a podium. That would be really good to see. Verstappen, conversely, has been in a good run of form, you could say. So podium in Belgium, Monza, he was competitive as far as his machinery would let him go, but then that incident with Bottas at the end of the race sort of took that 4th place away from him. So, Red Bull as well are going to put the heat on Ferrari.
And I guess they'll be hoping just to get a little bit more inertia back, since that probably has disappeared since the heights of, we had Austria there, that was really where you could see that and until Ricciardo after Monaco respectively, there'd been probably a season of 2 halves, whether you look at it from each driver's perspective, but to have both of them right up there and just capitalising on the characteristics here probably will be their final chance realistically, and more so for Ricciardo, who's always been quite handy here, just for that confidence. You can see that he just doesn't seem to be enjoying himself, and who would when he seems to be really 100% of the time at the moment copying that misfortune, whether it's from the gearbox or the power unit, whatever it is to do with that packaging between Red Bull's architecture and the Renault.
Well, am I wrong in saying that since 2014 he's been on the podium every time in Singapore? I don't know. 2016 is probably the only one that I'm not sure about, but yeah, 2014, 15, and then last year 2017, and definitely.
Very close last year actually to pipping Hamilton. That was a great race.
Yeah,
by 12 months ago.
towards the end of the race. So yeah, that was if it was a few laps longer. I remember him saying he would have definitely had it. Actually, no, 2016 he was on the podium because he almost beat Nico Rosberg that day as well. So Rosberg was struggling with the tyres at the end of the race, and Ricciardo was right up there. So
Well, it does show you it's in line with the way that he tends to get stronger as the race does progress, and sometimes he's just beaten to the punch, whether it's the time constraints, which is so often a factor here, or just the characteristics being of the track where he can't quite make a move stick. But it's one where you'll think that he might be qualifying maybe 5th or 6th, but he's always going to be in that equation if he can be around that top 3 mark by the final round of pit stops.
yeah, they've got to be top 5, you think, in qualifying Red Bull if they're going to be a chance this weekend. Also, 100% safety car record. That in itself, it speaks for itself. There's going to be chaos, whether it's going to be at the front of the field or at the back of the field, we don't know. Given that last year we had it right at the front of the field, you can't rule out anything. So even if you've got pole position, some idiot might decide to come down your inside or whatever, especially that run to turn 1. It's not that long, and also turn 1 itself is such a tight little corner because it turns into turn 2, really. You go left, right, straight into turn 2. So yeah, a lot can go wrong there, and the chance of unlikely results popping up as well. Backmarkers scoring points as such. So Williams, they scored with both cars last time out in Monza. Can they score again this weekend? Force India, they've been in such good touch since they've had the rebranding done as well. So can they take back a haul of points? McLaren, on paper, it's doesn't really suit, like it should suit their car, but if it's as dogged as it has been in the past, it looks like they might not. This is the weekend. Let me rephrase it. In the past, they've been really good here with the Honda engine, but this year the chassis has been the terrible part of their season. So whether they're going to score points here this weekend, it looks unlikely, but if they're in the right place at the right time, it could happen.
Yeah, the chassis has regressed, which would have thought it would have gone the other way with a little bit more consistency from the Renault, but it didn't happen for them at Hungary, and you're just seeing, for particularly Stoffel Vandoorne, you can't take a trick. He would do very well after the news that he's on his way out from McLaren, just for something for him to hold his hat on. But you'd think it's someone more likely like Sauber there, who might be able to get themselves into the pointier end of maybe 6th to 8th instead of just that final place, and look out for a Charles Leclerc there to really stand out, and probably on the back of the news we're all about to discuss, really nail in that thought that it was a warranted promotion.
Yeah, likes of Leclerc, even the Toro Rossos. I think it would be good this weekend for them to get in the points too. Brendan Hartley in particular. Pierre Gasly's been sensational all season. So, it's one of those races where we can sit down and talk about it as much as you want, but then ultimately it's going to be an unpredictable race. We don't know what's going to happen. So that's probably the fun part about Singapore every year, is that you can go into it and not know what's going to happen. And that's how it was 2015, where we were surprised to see Mercedes just nowhere and Ferrari just dominate every practice session, qualifying and the race.
Depending on those conspiracy theorists there, maybe that 2015 result in the aftermath of that tyre pressure little fiasco we had at Italy that season, always that notion that perhaps they were ordered by the FIA to do something to pull them back, and that was a little bit of a sanction, because it is a bit of an outlier regardless of how fortunate they might have been, particularly last season, that they were just absolutely nowhere. In other years they're always able to at least get one driver on the podium or jag a victory, when we always think of Ferrari or Red Bull's going to emerge on top here. And you never know, if just like last year the rain strikes at the right moment, I think Hamilton's going to be very confident.
Yeah, exactly, and that's probably what everyone else isn't hoping for indeed. And yeah, it's going to be a great weekend as always, Singapore. So let's go over the digest quickly before we get into our discussion about some more silly season news regarding Ferrari and Kimi Räikkönen and Charles Leclerc. The switch has been made and Räikkönen's going to Sauber, but starting off, and this sort of caught everyone's attention over the weekend in Moto 2, and Romano Fenati, the hothead, again in trouble. This time it's career-ending trouble because he hit his rival Stefano Manzi, I think it was, his brakes as they were coming down the straight at Misano. So he actually stuck his hand across and tried to push the brake pedal with his own hand, and that's just, someone could have been killed in that situation. So originally he was just given a 2-race ban by the stewards and whatnot. That's sort of then resulted in the team dropping him and his contract for next year being terminated by MV Augusta. And then, the fallout from that, he's decided to walk away from motorcycle racing altogether. So good riddance, because this is not the first time we've seen him do this. He was dropped by the Sky VR46 team, in Moto 3 a couple of years ago because of a similar outburst that he had on track where he's recklessly endangered someone's life. So, I was surprised after that he was given a second chance and found himself in Moto 2, and now I guess this is the line in the sand.
You can draw a lot of parallels to four wheels with Santino Ferrucci. It wasn't quite as heinous, his actions there, but just that blatant disregard for his competition. They're pretty much only in it for themselves, and they just don't have really any lateral consideration of those consequences. And you can see for Fenati in this case, he's made that call, what you could say on his terms, to retire, but he didn't have a future. His reputation was trashed, and it's just a shame that message isn't sinking in for these riders and drivers when you go to four wheels. They have to respect the racetrack, and for all the time and money that's invested in these individuals, it's just a shame to think that someone else who's there and has made put their whole life towards it, and it can really be ended just like that.
Well, isn't Ferrucci now back? He's doing IndyCar, so
somehow,
how is that even allowed? And IndyCar is supposedly more dangerous than Formula One at the moment. That could be something that they end up regretting when something happens and he gets up to his usual antics. But we'll move it on quickly anyway to some better and more positive, or not really positive news, but something different. And Mercedes talking up the idea of having a third car again. And I guess that whole topic's come back to light in recent weeks because of the situation regarding Esteban Ocon, who looks like he might not be on the grid next year for Formula One. So Toto Wolff saying that, why can't the big teams have a third car for drivers like Ocon, which are the junior drivers? And he says that, the whole junior program for Mercedes might as well go in the bin if Ocon doesn't find a seat next year. And I guess it sort of brings up that debate, while having a third car might be a good idea for the sake of having these drivers on the grid, commercially and also for the smaller teams, it's not really good, because it means that Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull are going to have 3 cars each, and that's basically your top 9 out of 10 positions sealed out. So if you could have a Mercedes podium lockout, something like that. So, while it could be good to keep Ocon on the grid, it's not good for Formula One.
Oh, not necessarily outright not good, but those parameters would have to be thought out very delicately. Maybe a concept where that third driver, the points don't accrue towards the constructors in any sense, even though on track they might be a top 3 for a certain Ferrari or Mercedes. At least it means that those teams won't be suffering financially if they can still accrue points in their own right for the 2 drivers that are there and as it is, and you can at least let these people who deserve a place at least have their own fight, and maybe it mightn't count towards titles, but at least it means they're getting that track time, and it's just the execution of it. It's clearly a very murky zone, but something just has to be done between third cars, or making sure the best drivers are out there, that it doesn't continue, because we're seeing so many at the moment who they miss a year or two, and they've got no options when it comes to, say, they win the F2, that they can't continue with that, and then they're left in a melting pot, some category which doesn't have the same reputation, and they're forgotten just like that.
Well, Ocon could easily just go to Williams. That chapter isn't closed, and I guess the problem too has been that McLaren's Zach Brown came out and said that because Ocon's affiliated with Mercedes, it meant that they weren't really keen to touch him as far as giving him a drive. So, perhaps that Mercedes Association has hurt him in this instance. If he was a free agent, it could have been a lot more easier to sign him up and whatnot.
That's where the problem is, though, when Mercedes probably shouldn't be punished for having that.
But Mercedes should, in that case, instead of talking about third cars, why don't they deploy a second team, altogether, like Red Bull have with Toro Rosso? Like, they could easily, I'm not saying easily, but, someone like a Force India, I guess you wouldn't want to touch Force India, but Williams now, they could easily be taken on as a Mercedes junior team. If it was to come to pass, then we wouldn't have this problem, I think.
Yeah, it'd make a lot of sense
And
for both parties. They're clearly, just by association, it's a shame that they're ruling each other out.
yeah, and it's a shame in that instance. And then Renault talking about slave teams and everything as well, which is an interesting term to use. It doesn't sound too good when you think about it, but if it means that you've got these guys on the grid, that's a good thing. And, if Mercedes were to imagine if Mercedes had so much money that they could set up a satellite team, that would be good as well. Same with Renault, I guess they can swap drive, like they've got McLaren, they've got their own factory team. Red Bull have Toro Rosso, and now they've got Honda, so it's all aligned, whereas Mercedes seem like they're the odd ones out in this instance, even though they do supply Williams and Force India. Why, if they're so close as what we're led to believe to be with those guys, they should be able to drop in one of their drivers there.
It's certainly something which needs to be instituted from 2021. You wouldn't want to do it overnight like a band-aid solution, but I think when you're thinking towards that sport's future, whether it's 2021 or 2023, whenever it does occur, that they need to make a way without taking away autonomy from those independents. That there's still an incentive for them. Clearly they'll get some reciprocal benefits from the big manufacturers, but it does mean that they're not taking on the drivers with the biggest pockets, but the ones that have the most outright talent.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of outright talent, and there's got to be a place for this guy on the grid in a couple of years' time, it's Mick Schumacher, because he dominated the Euro F3 weekend at the Nürburgring, winning all three races. So next year, I'm pretty sure he's going to Formula 2. I think it's all but confirmed. So, 2020 or 2021, that's where we might see the next generation of Schumacher on the F1 grid.
It's been a rapid ascension over the past few weeks. A lot of talk earlier was that he's good but not great, and suddenly he's getting this consistency and the confidence which comes from a little bit of success, and probably that path where that combined F3 series coming under the Formula 1 support umbrella from next season. We thought that was the logical next step, but now this talk of going straight into F2, and who knows how well he does there. If he wins a title next season, then he might be naturally ready for a move to F1 in 2020, but you wouldn't want to rush him in any case. He's still only 19, but I think that suddenly he's on that radar, and you'd think in the next 2 to 3 years, if he keeps up this trajectory, there's every chance that he's going to be on the grid, and that would be a great moment, just considering everything to do with his dad. You think that it would really just come full circle and close a chapter in a way, and who knows, just a little thought, if it were to come to pass, it would be ironic if say, Mick Schumacher ended up at a Sauber, say, 2020 with a certain Kimi Raikkonen as a teammate, and that would be a little bit ironic when you consider that Raikkonen replaced Michael Schumacher in 2007. Then you say 2020, you've got Raikkonen and Schumacher as teammates.
Yeah, with two decades between them as well, as far as age is concerned. So that would be pretty funny indeed. But yeah, 2021, ideally, I think, if all goes to plan, you should see Mick Schumacher in F1, which will be great, given if this is the kind of form he's got with him in his junior career. If he gets to, say, a Mercedes or a Ferrari in his career in F1, then yeah, he's going to go long. And Schumacher versus Verstappen, Ocon, and the likes of Lando Norris, perhaps.
Spare a thought for Mick Schumacher's cousin David Schumacher, son of Ralph, who's also been extremely promising, but probably not with that spotlight. But until recently, he'd been the one where everyone had been lavishing praise. So we could yet have another generation of multiple Schumachers on the grid.
Well, thankfully, I guess with Ralph, the gene sort of skipped a generation where it's his son that's more talented. his
Like Jos Verstappen.
his son was more talented than the father, so yeah, that would be good to see. But enough of the Schumachers anyway, and let's do our little discussion this week about Ferrari, Sauber, and the switch between Kimi Räikkönen and Charles Leclerc. So I guess what was inevitable has finally happened, and Kimi Räikkönen told that his services won't be required by Ferrari next year, but he's not dropping off the grid. He's going to be at Sauber for the next 2 years, which will take him till 41. And Charles Leclerc, his rise continues as he will be the youngest driver to be a Scuderia Ferrari driver since, I think, it's 1964 or something.
I think it's a win-win for Raikkonen and Leclerc, and not the biggest loser, but the one with the heat on him the most is Sebastian Vettel. He's now really got that pressure there to deliver, because Leclerc will be being ushered on very quickly as the future for Ferrari, whilst for Raikkonen he can finally stop being that battering ram, and whilst Sauber's probably not going to be a race winner, he can at least have that momentum from the team, and they'll give him the best strategies instead of just being the whipping boy and the one who might be fastest, not more often than not, but quite a lot of the time, and yet being put out to pasture. So Vettel gets all the plaudits when you see that that's not even being fully utilised by the German today. If Leclerc comes in straight away and he's on his game, then Vettel's got some serious problems on his hands.
Well, the first question to ask here is that will Leclerc's arrival further galvanise Vettel in the team instead of playing that subordinate that Kimi has been over the years? This idea of that Kimi doesn't really put pressure on Seb, and Seb's just become a bit too comfortable, hence all these mistakes. Will Leclerc snapping on the heels of Seb make him, give him that killer instinct or whatever, and push him towards winning that title? That's probably what, as much as I don't want Leclerc to be the subordinate, I want Leclerc to be successful. But if it's a benefit to Ferrari and for Vettel as well, then that'll be a good thing too. If they don't win the title this year, it's got to be next.
Yeah, well, Vettel, he's got that contract through till 2020, and if he doesn't deliver it by then, I think that'll be the end of him as the future for Ferrari, at least in this attempt. And Leclerc, he'll be given that time at the same moment. They can't expect him to be out there winning races and competing for the title next season. But if it does come to pass that he is on the same level as Vettel, then Ferrari won't waste much time in casting the German aside, and that's something he has to be wary of. And how soon he does respond, it has to be almost this weekend, just for momentum.
Dare I say he gets replaced by another German in 2021, Mick Schumacher.
That'd be taking the mickey for him to debut with Ferrari, let alone Leclerc after a single season. But not that anyone's opposed to another Schumacher at Ferrari.
Exactly, but it's really pressure on for Seb Vettel, as you wrote as well today, and I guess, even though as good as it is that Leclerc's going to be there and a young driver, finally, I mean, this is the thing, how many young drivers have we seen in the past where like, oh yeah, they'll be driving for Ferrari, and it doesn't eventuate. So I've got to take my hat off to Ferrari in this instance for taking the gamble and embracing a young driver finally, which, they've not done for so. Jules Bianchi, I can understand, that's a given what happened there, but, the likes of Sergio Perez, who were in frame for Ferrari, Nico Hulkenberg once upon a time was as well. Roman Grosjean as well, but I guess Charles Leclerc's the one who's going to bring home the mustard for them.
Nice to see they are honouring the wishes of the recently departed Ferrari CEO there in Sergio Marchionne, and there was a bit of, you could say, just wavering between that first talk in maybe April or May that Leclerc was coming in, and then Raikkonen got on his game, and now Vettel's really the one who's been inconsistent, and so maybe the ultimate, you could say, purpose that Leclerc's come in has changed a little bit from the initial reason, but the fact is that they've followed through with it, and whether Leclerc justifies it immediately or not, he he does represent that future, and he's got really, he could be at Ferrari for 10 years or more. They can build a proper generation around him now, and as for what Vettel achieves in the shorter term, that's up to him.
Exactly. But let's turn the topic over to Kimi Räikkönen then. And, what does him going to Sauber mean? Is it a demotion? Do you take it as a demotion? Or, do you think that he's actually going to aid with the rebuilding of the Sauber team? They've been revitalised this year with a closer tie-up to Ferrari, the Alfa Romeo link as well, Charles Leclerc putting in the good results for them. So what does Kimi do? He's not just going to, I'm sure he's not a guy who's just going to flounder around at the back end of the field. He'll be competitive, and hopefully Sauber will be in the midfield as well.
And a bit of talk as well, he might be looking at taking on a bit of an investment capacity, and who knows whether he would transition to a managerial role after he hangs up that helmet. That would be quite a sight, him on a pit wall calling the shots. But stranger things have happened. Who would have foreseen Raikkonen as a prolific Instagrammer 12 months ago?
Well, he's done the team management thing already with his Ice One Racing Rally team, so surely he's got those management credentials behind him. But being in the daylight and also in the view that Formula One is as well, that could be something new.
And you can see that if it is a, dare we say, Giovinazzi finally gets a chance, if the little Ericsson sphere of influence is weeded out, then he'd be really great as a bit of a mentor to him or whoever it might be. Someone who, not that Ericsson's a poor driver, but someone who really has that defined future and really accelerates their own progress over the next 2 years.
Or if Stoffel Van Dorn still gets that seat, which could yet be an option. So still plenty to play out in the silly season as that topic is concerned. But as far as this move is concerned, any last thoughts, I guess, because it just makes me look forward to next year's championship already more so. Even though we've still got a championship battle on our hands this year, I'm already looking forward to next year to see how this new look grid will look.
Yeah, well, there's wholesale change now. It took a long time to get off the blocks, but Ricciardo really did trigger that domino effect, and it's good to see the sport have that facelift once in a while, and you can never be sure until it really plays out, and even longer term that it is the right call, but it's something the sport needed. And I think on a more immediate basis it will be fascinating to see if Kimi Räikkönen ditches that number 2 moniker over the coming 7 races and is in it for himself and can still have a crack at that victory, just to sign off on his Ferrari tenure victoriously. It does remain, unless Vettel gets the job done this season or whenever it comes to pass, the most recent champion. So he's still got that to hold his head high.
Yeah, and also just getting that win will be quite important, because you wouldn't imagine him winning a race for Sauber, and I don't think for the next 2 years he wants to go on without winning a race. So yeah, this year it's got to happen if it can, and we've talked about it all year long. It's just a matter of when now.
Yes, I think things are coming to a head pretty quickly. So you could say not that Vettel and Raikkonen dislike each other, but the gloves are probably off when it comes to where the interests lie.
Exactly. So that's it for F1. Let's move it over to Supercars now, and of course Enduro Cup time, our favourite time of the year as far as Supercars is concerned, and the Sandown 500 kicking off this weekend with that retro round that's become a mainstay, you could say, with Sandown every year. So the longer races, the co-drivers, the pit stops, tyre change, fuel change, it's all here, and it just complicates everything a lot more. The co-drivers being added into the equation makes the championship more exciting. The fact that we've had a new form driver going into the Enduros in Shane van Gisbergen, having taken the points lead last time out at Tailem Bend. So, the pressure is really on those co-drivers and the championship contenders.
Yes, and I think with that recent stumble from DJRTP, really the momentum does lie in Triple Eight HRT's corner. So if they follow through this weekend, suddenly the pressure comes to Bathurst, where McLaughlin's really been cruelled in recent campaigns there. So I think this is really one where they just need to be right up there, if not winning, at least a solid haul of points, and it's not something you would have considered probably a couple of months ago. So the onus is there, but you would back McLaughlin to now have that maturity to know what he has to do.
Yeah, and I guess the combination with him and Alex Premer, as always, is going to be quite strong. But I guess they do need the results to add to that title bid. So last year in the Enduro Cup, Sandown, it was a podium. Gold Coast, they had a podium and a win. And Bathurst is the one where they were crawled at despite having that pole position. So this year, you'd think that if they can start off with a strong Sandown, bank 300 points, Bathurst take any points as it comes, that'll be crucial. Because last year, the thing with McLaughlin and Premer was that they were classified as a non-finisher, which means you don't score points. So in Supercars, you score points all the way down to the end of the grid. So yeah, it's about actually being classified, scoring points, and those points are going to count come Newcastle at the end of the season.
You can see after that elation of the pole position last year at Bathurst, it was a bit of a come down for them, but before they get there, this is one where they just really need to keep it on the track, and it's a fun game again as far as the Enduros go. You can have one poor race out of the four that comprise the Enduro Cup, and that can do your dash, so they just need to be there or thereabouts each.
Exactly. So, yeah, and just going over the grid now as well, quickly, a few changes. So, the big one to talk about is Shane van Gisbergen. He'll have Earl Bamber joining him this year, which I'm really excited about as well. The two-time Le Mans champion and also the reigning World Endurance champion as well. So, he's up to speed in that 888 car. He'll be one to look out for. They're both good friends as well outside of the car. So, given the form that SVG's in at the moment, they're going to be a lethal pairing.
Yeah, I think for Bamber, clearly his pedigree overseas goes well with Van Gisbergen, who's been quite strong on that in recent years, and you can see that it doesn't look like he'll take too long to get up to speed, and he'll just be wanting to make sure that he's a competent co-driver there, since Van Gisbergen's really found another level in recent times.
Exactly, and then the reigning Endurance Cup champion Chaz Mostert finds himself paired up with James Moffat, which could be a good lineup too. Moffat is pretty quick at this time of year and not racing in Supercars full time this year, but on his own should be pretty good.
Yeah, I think for Mostert, he's probably just been a bit disappointed the way things have panned out in recent years, but with James Moffat there, who I guess things haven't worked out for him on a full time level, he'll be knowing the importance here of delivering, at least to get some momentum in for ProDrive, who have just not been able to execute in really back-to-back races or weekends any time in the past few years. So they've got still a fair way to go to rediscover its mojo, but they've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I guess endurance time is always a good time for the teams to come back. And last year, Tickford dominated this event with Cam Waters and Richie Stanaway. And Stanaway this year on his with his own entry will be partnered with Steve Owen, who is the reigning Endurance Cup champion as well, of course. So look out for those guys who should be strong here too, if Tickford are strong as a team. And you got to say, for the guys who are sort of championship outsiders, Whincup and David Reynolds, having a strong Endurance Cup will put them back in contention as well, you'd think. Of course, Reynolds was the Bathurst winner last year, so scoring a lot of points could put them back in the hunt here. Craig Lowndes as well, final Endurance Cup as a full-time driver, so expect him to try and get some good results to go out before he retires.
Yeah, for Lowndes, you can see that as far as it being that farewell lap, he still has a fair bit he wants to prove, and for Bathurst, he's done it so many times. He's always someone who steps up to that plate when it's the pointy end of the season, so he's one you'd expect to give it a proper crack, and again, he's got a great co-driver alongside him. The years of experience those two have probably peerless on that grid, but I guess for Whincup and Reynolds, the way you see those maybe next come off the rank teams there, that maybe they do have a bit of a period there where the gas runs out, so you'd hope that they can get it back on at this point in the season and again follow on from what they had last year.
Yeah, exactly. And Bathurst, Lowndes, they have their history is synonymous with each other. So you'd think that, let's write another chapter this year. It would be good to see, and Triple Eight are in good form too. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it starting this weekend. So should be good. We'll be there, so that'll be always a good thing.
Yeah, bring it on.
Exactly. So let's round things off, I guess, with our sporting moments of the week. And I'm guessing this week it's going to be a lot to do with footy because, Baden, footy is great, as was coined by I don't know what to describe him as, but yeah, footy's great.
Yeah, well, it's getting to that really pointy end, particularly for Collingwood. They need to get the job done on Saturday night, but signs are there that they've got that capacity to do it, and certainly nothing wrong with their performance last weekend on the road.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be a big one against GWS this week for you guys, and then in NRL land as well. Yeah, some big games coming up with Cronulla up against the Panthers, in the semi-final, and of course the Dragons last week stunned the Broncos, which was a good game to watch as well. And they'll be up against, I think it's I forgot who they're playing now. Bit silly of me. Anyway,
the Broncos.
No, the Dragons are playing. Who is it? The
Rabbitohs.
The Rabbitohs. How can I... the team I had as my grand finalist this year, I forgot about them. Yeah, the Rabbitohs. So that should be really good as well to watch. So yeah, September is always that good time of year. But I think what stood out for me this week was not to do with footy at all, even though we're just talking about footy, but Alistair Cook retiring from Test match cricket, even though he's a POM and we don't like him. He put to rest his form slump by scoring a century in his final game, which I guess it's like, where was that all along? He just come along and score. I think he scored 70 in the first innings and made a century in the second innings against India in what was his last ever Test match. So bookending a really strong career, you could say, for him. Started his career with a century, ends it with a century.
And you wouldn't want to think that he's going to regret that decision to pull it down now. It's the best way for him to go out, and he's been a great leader for England over so many years. Perhaps he would have liked to have extended another 12 months through to the Ashes in 2019, but I think that he's still going to be remembered extremely highly. And I guess we should also mention Jimmy Anderson, for what it's worth, that he's surpassed Glenn McGrath as the most successful fast bowler with, I think, 563, I think, wickets, and who knows how much more he's got in the tank, but that's a huge achievement in its own right.
With 68% of those wickets coming on home turf, which is the statistic you've got to throw in there as well. So given that overseas he seems to be pretty woeful, you could say. But anywho, that's about it, I guess, for this week, unless there was anything else you wanted to add. Yeah.
It's all ahead of us.
Yeah, well, Singapore, Sandown, and a lot more footy to watch this weekend. So we'll have it all for you next week to wrap up. So until then, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Till then.